Hello and welcome to this very special episode on Times Network with me, Sunanda Jayaseelan. We're talking the big picture on education, what is education today, how it is changing and what the education of the future is looking like, what are the skill sets of the future and how students need to prepare themselves for those skills, and what universities, including the likes of Deakin, are doing when it comes to ensuring that students have everything that they need when they're entering the job markets that are rapidly changing. I'm in conversation with Professor Iain Martin, the Vice-Chancellor of Deakin University, in this very freewheeling, exclusive conversation. Do listen. So good having you with us here on the Leaders of Tomorrow, Iain. Really talking about the very crucial role that education is playing in today's society, and how just the role of education really is changing, and the role of universities like yourself, especially when it comes to bilateral relations between India and Australia, and the role that you're playing in that. So thank you for your time here today.
Delighted to be with you.
I want to really start first and foremost by talking about your partnership with India. And you started here in 1994, and you have this philosophy of in India, with India. Just really talk to us about that.
So for Deakin, this has been our most substantial and long-lasting country-to-country relationship. And for us, it's not just about coming to India and recruiting students to study in Australia. It's about a meaningful partnership, which means we encourage students to seek a really high quality education with Deakin, but at the same time we're looking for doing things with partners in India that makes a difference to the communities around those partners, to India more broadly. Because we think if we do that well, the other sides of what we do will also flourish.
I want to take a step back literally and talk about the past few years, which have been difficult for everyone across the world, and really talk about the impact that it's had as far as Deakin and the whole education space is concerned. I'm talking, of course, about the pandemic. You took over just 6 months before the pandemic hit us. What was that period like for those 2 years when you didn't know what you were preparing for, even as in the middle of the pandemic?
So I'll talk about that in two ways. One was the broader leadership thing, which was the only constant for much of 2020 and early 21 was change. None of us had ever experienced this before. None of us knew what was coming next. So for our university, we had to move to a point very quickly where we had to deliver everything online because we were not able to deliver anything physically on our campuses from an educational perspective. Now for Deakin, that was a big jump, but not as big as some, because we'd had a long-standing tradition of digital technology-enabled education, which stood us in good stead, but nothing quite gave you that experience that would say overnight you have to move a whole university to online delivery. Now, some of it was really challenging and we wouldn't ever want to go back there, but some of it we've kept. So we've thought about new ways of putting our courses together, new ways about using technology to aid assessment. Where does assessment really need to sit within courses? What's the best way of engaging students online? And how can we think innovatively about things that we'd always only ever done on campus, but we were forced to do online? There was also the other very important point of this, which is we suddenly had a whole cohort of students, both domestic and international, whose entire educational journey had been thrown up in the air. It was challenging enough for our local Australian students, but for our international students, our Indian students, to suddenly find themselves halfway around the world in a country that they were planning to come and study in, but not in the way that they were expecting to do, being on your own, and not only not possibly being able to get home, but actually physically unable to leave because both countries didn't have flights available for quite some time. So we had to do a lot of work in supporting those students, and certainly Deakin invested very heavily and very quickly in that support. We wrote a cheque for $25 million to support the international students so they wouldn't go hungry, they wouldn't run out of somewhere to live, they could keep going. And what we were really pleased about is that 80% of those students stayed with us for the duration of their degree. Even when they could return, they stayed. And I think our entire team were really proud of that. So I think we learnt a lot. Would we want to go back? No. But I think the lasting legacy is it's challenged us around what should we keep from the changes we made with COVID and where should we go back to? And I think the other thing it's done is made us focus a lot more on actually the on-campus experience, what matters in there as well. What's the most important bits of that?
Sure. A couple of questions from what you've just said. And first, I must congratulate you. I understand you have a celebration for students who missed their convocation because of the COVID, and you want to give them that, that proper send-off.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think graduations is one of those things that you just simply cannot replace with an online ceremony. We decided not to do digital graduation ceremonies. We saw a few online and we thought this really doesn't work very well, so we did some smaller functions where we could do it outside, but for those students who missed, we're doing catch-ups and we're doing a convocation ceremony just to enable students to get that chance to celebrate what is a real milestone achievement in their lives. Yeah,
so you said there are some things that can't be replaced by technology, but some can.
Yes.
So my question is really a big picture question to say, how much of education going forward, not just for you at Deakin, but what's the big picture vision or view in terms of just how much of education is going to get done digitally, and how universities can marry the two now seamlessly?
Yeah. So I think our vision is to have a university where we do both the physical and the digital really well, and we enable students to move between the two worlds seamlessly.
Yeah.
There's no one answer to the question you've just given me because it depends on the point of it in your education journey. If you're an 18-year-old student, you've just left home for the first time, coming to university is a big experience, you don't have that background knowledge to build the structure around you, the on-campus experience, that helping you put the framework around it is really important. Whereas if you are, say, a 35 or a 40-year-old professional who's wanting to pick up an additional skill, being able to have that delivered online in a quality way is probably a really good thing because it'll fit around your work, your family, all of those other things that you're doing. So it's not just about what we can do overall, but it's how do we marry the student's point in their education journey, what they want to achieve, and the technologies to give the same. As Deakin, we've said we want to make sure to the best of our ability that a program we deliver digitally has the same underpinning characteristics, skills delivered, achievements delivered as it would done if you did it on campus. It's just done in a different way. It's made us think, but it is really important. But I think you have to think about both the student themselves and what they want as well as what can be done. But I think COVID certainly said we can do a whole lot more online. And I think the other thing for our India relationship was prior to COVID, online education perhaps wasn't the most easily talked about subject in India. It was sort of regarded very much as sort of the second option if you can't get to a physical campus. I think there's still a little bit of that, but it's demonstrated that done well, you can do quite a lot of your study, develop your skills, your education online. And we saw that during COVID. We had lots of students who knew that they couldn't start a degree with Deakin, but were quite happy to study a small number of units online while they were waiting for borders to open up again and do that transition. And again, that's been really useful because it's opened up opportunities to say to students, actually, we can be more flexible. You can do some in your home country, some in Australia, mix and match to suit what you want to achieve from life.
You use the word skills, so let me just pick up on that and really talk about also how the skill sets that are being required in this post-pandemic world, in this increasingly more digital world, are very different from perhaps what we even saw just about 2 years ago. And how are you preparing your students for that?
Yeah, so I think there's really two sets of skills we look at. And I think when I go and talk to employers in India, in Australia, there's the first set of skills that they say, almost irrespective of program, irrespective of course, irrespective of undergraduate or postgraduate, they want to see. They want graduates who are good communicators, can work in teams, are able to think critically, solve problems, think outside the box a little bit. Now, it doesn't matter whether you're doing an engineering degree, a computer science degree, or a humanities degree. Those are still the skills that you need.
Sure.
But then there's a second set of skills. And I think COVID draws some of this into sharp focus. Pretty much every business became a digital business during COVID. Yeah. And that meant all of a sudden, people had to gain skills in data analytics, logistics, cybersecurity. And I think that there is an ongoing role, particularly in those who are in the middle of their career, for delivering perhaps shorter, sharper, really good qualifications that meet those needs. Because many of the people who went through our cyber qualifications or our data analytics qualifications during COVID, 2-3 years ago, they'd have no idea that they were going to be doing that. They hadn't realised that was something that they needed. So we really need to do that. And I think, let's wind the clock back 20, 30 years. Nobody would have seen what the internet has done for connectivity, for the availability of knowledge. Wind the clock forward 20 or 30 years, there's no reason to suppose that rate of change is going to slow up. So we're going to continue to need to have a workforce that can adapt, can change, and can make the most of those opportunities.
I'm going to take a quick break on that note, much more on the other side. Do stay tuned, back in just a moment. Welcome back. You're with us on this very special episode on Times Network. We were talking about this offline,
yes.
How in this digital world, a lot of the skill sets that are going to be required for jobs don't even exist. You don't know what the jobs of the future are going to look like, and
yes.
yet you're required to be prepared for that, because when you come out of college,
yes.
you have to be prepared for the job. How are you sort of helping students then manage that change?
I think to some extent it's giving them that sense of managing uncertainty, knowing that things are going to change, and giving them the confidence to actually say, uncertainty and change is not a bad thing. It's just an inevitable thing. It's about how you handle it, how you make the most of it. Giving them the sense to have the confidence to say, I don't know the answer, but I know where to go and find out.
Okay.
I don't know the answer, but I know if I go there, I can pick up the skills that will help me find the answer. So it's about those skills that are going to be really important. I'm old enough to remember education pre-internet. Getting any information was incredibly hard. You had to traipse off to the library and wade through dusty books. Now you can do it from the comfort of your own room. You can get access to almost anything within just a few seconds. But interpreting that, understanding what that information means, how to best use that information, those are the kind of skills that we want people to come out of a university education now with, and those are the kind of skills that employers want.
Again, this is something that we were chatting with before we started this interview, and without going into the specifics, bilateral relations have been at the heart, and education really has been at the heart of bilateral relations between India and other countries. What role do you think education is going to continue playing when it comes to just India's relationship with the world, and how crucial is that going to be?
I think I've been fortunate enough to have a university career that's enabled me to travel widely, visit many countries, India many, many, many times.
Sure.
And what you see repeatedly are the bonds that are formed during people's educational experience, are the bonds that keep going through people's careers. And I think that sense of both an individual understanding of another country, another culture, the ability to work across different groups, different environments, education plays a key role, and I think that will continue to be the case. So if I look at the India-Australia relationship, through good times, more challenging times. Almost the one constant for the last 30 or 40 years has been the education institution to education institution linkages. They've stayed. And I think they will continue to be really important in building that nation-to-nation understanding. Every time I travel, I'm struck by, actually, it's very different being in India to being in Melbourne. But actually, when you talk to people around a dinner table or around an office, what people are talking about, their aspirations, what they want to see for their family, their own careers, is really not very different. So I think that understanding as well is really important.
My last couple of questions, and as we're winding down, the last time that we had Deakin on the Leaders of Tomorrow, we were of course sending 4 very talented, very bright students off on scholarships to Deakin in Australia. How are they doing?
They're doing really well. I mean, look, they were our Vice-Chancellor's scholarship recipients. I mean, they are incredible students, all of them. And because this has been such a great program, we've decided that rather than 4, we're going to move up to 10 for next year. And we're going to add to that some research fellowships, both for studying research in Australia and in India. It's part of our ongoing commitment in India with India. It's not a one-way transaction for us. And as I say, those students are just always an inspiration because they are so bright, they're so talented, and they are so enthusiastic about what the future has to offer. It just reminds you why you come to work every day.
I can vouch for that, having met them. We are called the Leaders of Tomorrow because we speak with aspiring entrepreneurs and young entrepreneurs and talk to them about everything that they require in their growth journey. And one of those is, of course, education. Your view on how critical it is for education, for anyone who wants to become a leader of tomorrow, what would you want to say?
I think to be a good leader, you've got to have a really good understanding of those around you, a really good understanding of the world, the way it works, what's happening in your discipline area, and probably beyond that. And I think education sits at the heart of that. It's really important. For almost every leader now, in almost any organisation, you're interacting across borders, across boundaries, across cultures. Education really gives you something there. But also, you've got to have a grasp of the fundamentals that underpin the area you're working in. If you're a business leader, understanding those fundamentals of business. If you're a health leader, understanding the fundamentals of healthcare. That comes from education. There's a whole lot of other skills that go with leadership, which are perhaps harder to teach in a university classroom, but without those core skills of that understanding, it's really very much harder. So that's where the education piece fits in, and it's really important.
How does one really, and perhaps you could talk to us about your own leadership style and really leave our viewers with, your advice as to how they perhaps can also become leaders of tomorrow?
I think all of us are shaped by the leaders we've experienced in the past, both good and bad. And the leaders that I've worked with who I thought, this is really great, are leaders who trust the people they work with, but at the same time expect loyalty back because of that trust. Enable people to develop their own skills, they don't micromanage, they accept that things won't always go right, and rather than being upset with that, they say, right, fine, draw a line under it, let's move on and learn from that and move on. But I think also the leaders that I've admired have been very values driven as well. They've said, if we are true to what we believe in as an organisation, we have to live that as well. And that's quite hard because you're in the public limelight, you're being watched, everything you do is watched, every move you make, every bit of language, tone you use is watched. And the best leaders I've had have always been very open about that, they understand that, and they can bring it with you. And I think the final thing is, you want somebody who's not, in my own view, not too serious, who can actually see the lighter side of things at times, but also remembers that there's life outside the organisation, that you've got some way of reflecting on actually another part of your life outside. That balance is also important. So I try and bring those to everything that I do. Do I always do it? No, nobody is perfect in this, but that's underpinned. I've learnt it from some great people I've worked with who've inspired me, and hopefully I can do a little bit of that back.
What next for you?
Look, I think I've got probably more exciting things to do with Deakin than I can possibly deliver in the next 5, 6, 7, 8 years of my career. I think for the India relationship for us, it is so exciting to have a number of really inspirational partners here, both in the commercial sector and in the university world, who want to work with us to actually do things a little bit differently, leverage off the opportunities that some of the government changes here around the new educational policy and other things enable us to do, and actually deliver on the potential of what so many people have worked so hard to do in the Deakin India relationship. So we were talking about working with inspirational partners, and one of the things we've done in this trip is to launch our hub approach with 3 really fantastic partner universities, OP Jindal, Chitkara and Symbiosis. And this is an opportunity not to have a Deakin standalone activity here, but to work in partnership with innovative universities to think about different ways of delivering transnational education. So the students are working towards both a host university degree, a Deakin degree. They can spend some of the time here, some of the time in Australia. But on top of that, build really deep and meaningful university-to-university relationships. And to be able to launch those 3 this week is just fantastic. There's already more than 220 students who've started in the programs that we've got with those hubs. We really believe it will continue to grow and offer a different way for students to experience the best of Indian and the best of Australian education.
And wish you all the very best for that. Thank you so much, Iain, for taking the time.
Thank you. Absolute pleasure.
That's all from us tonight. If you have any feedback, do let us know. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good night.